My brother got my fiancée pregnant, and my dad gave him the family business and a house. So I decided to make them pay for their betrayal. I never thought I'd be one of those people posting here, but here I am. Angry, heartbroken, and with my entire world turned upside down. If you had told me a year ago that my own brother and fiancé would destroy my life, and my father would reward them for it, I would have laughed in your face. But now, I'm not laughing. I'm a 33-year-old man. My fiancée, Claire, 31, and I had been together for 6 years. We met through mutual friends, clicked instantly, and built what I thought was a solid foundation. For the last 3 years, we'd been engaged. I wanted to wait until our finances were perfect before the wedding. Call me old-fashioned, but I wanted to give her the best life I could. The family business has been my entire life since I was 18. My father started it decades ago, and I worked my way up from sweeping the warehouse floor to managing major accounts. I poured blood, sweat, and weekends into that company. My dad was strict and never one for compliments, but I assumed deep down he respected me. My younger brother, Evan, 28, has always been different. He's the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my father's eyes. Growing up, if Evan skipped school, it was because boys will be boys. If I got a B+ instead of an A, it was, why can't you be more like Evan? He's charming, good-looking, and utterly unreliable. He's had more career changes than I can count. I always figured I'd be the one to inherit the business while Evan would wander from job to job. Claire got along with him. Too well, apparently. About 6 months ago, I started noticing changes in her. She became distant, guarded with her phone, and suddenly had girls' nights that ended suspiciously late. Evan started stopping by our place more often, sometimes when I wasn't even home. I brushed it off at first. They were future siblings-in-law, right? Maybe they were just bonding. Then little things piled up. Claire would get defensive when I asked where she'd been. I'd catch Evan giving her these loaded looks. You know the kind. Too familiar, too intimate for comfort. My gut screamed something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. The truth hit me in the ugliest way possible. One evening, Claire left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. A text popped up from Evan. It read, "I'll pick you up tomorrow. We'll tell him after the first trimester so it's not as bad." I froze. My hands shook as I opened the conversation. There it was, months of messages, late-night meetups. "I can't stop thinking about you," and worst of all, confirmation that Claire was pregnant with my brother's child. When she came out of the bathroom, I was sitting there with her phone in my hand. I didn't yell at first. I just asked her to explain. She started crying, saying it just happened, and she didn't mean to hurt me. She claimed she was confused about our relationship, and Evan understood her better. I stormed out and went straight to my parents' house to confront Evan. He didn't even look guilty, just smug. His excuse? "You were too busy with work." Claire needed someone who was actually there for her. That night, I told my father everything. I thought naively that he'd be furious at Evan, that he'd support me. Instead, he said, "Well, blood is blood. You'll find someone else. Your brother has to step up now. He's going to be a father." I felt like I'd been punched, but it got worse. 2 weeks later, my father announced that he was handing the family business over to Evan, said he needed a fresh start and a younger vision for the future. He also gifted Evan and Claire one of the family properties. As a wedding present, I was stunned. I had given 15 years of my life to that company, sacrificed relationships, vacations, even my health for it. And it was handed to the man who stole my fiancée. My father looked me in the eye and said, "You're overreacting. Don't let a woman come between family." I left before I said something I couldn't take back. The days after were a blur of rage and numbness. It wasn't just losing Claire. It wasn't just Evan's smug grin or my father's condescending tone. It was the crushing realization that my family, my own blood, didn't value me at all. I had been loyal, dependable, the one who held everything together, and they had discarded me without hesitation. But as the shock wore off, something else replaced it. Clarity. I'm not going to scream at them. I'm not going to beg for what's mine. I'm going to make them regret underestimating me. I know my brother's weaknesses. I know exactly how the business runs. I know every client, every supplier, every number in those books. They think they've won. They think I'll just fade away quietly while they play happy family in the house that should have been mine. They're wrong. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to be smart. And I'm going to make sure that when they fall, they'll have no one to blame but themselves. I won't raise a hand. I won't break the law. But I'll make them wish they had never crossed me. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. Update 1. The first steps of revenge. It's been 2 months since I found out about Evan and Claire. The first few days after, I was a wreck, barely sleeping, barely eating, replaying every conversation, every moment, wondering how I missed the signs. But I learned quickly that letting emotions steer the ship would only make me crash harder. So I did something my brother would never expect. I went quiet. I stopped calling. Stopped showing up. Stopped engaging with them or my father. On the surface, it probably looked like I had accepted what happened and was moving on. In reality, I was sharpening my knives, figuratively speaking. The first step was severing ties with the family business. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I simply told my father I'd be pursuing other opportunities. He acted smug, like it was confirmation I couldn't handle the loss. But that was exactly the impression I wanted him to have. Leaving on my own terms gave me a clean break. No emotional scenes, no public drama. I was free to move in the shadows, and the shadows were where I thrived. I know that business inside and out. Every client, every supplier, every handshake deal, every seasonal trend. I also know Evan's personality. Impulsive, arrogant, desperate. To prove himself but unwilling to do the actual work. He thrives on image, not substance. That's a weakness I could work with. I started by quietly reconnecting with old clients and suppliers, ones I had personally managed for years. I reached out under the guise of catching up and networking. I didn't badmouth Evan or the business. I just listened. A lot of them were already unhappy with the new leadership. Deadlines were being missed. Calls weren't returned. Evan was making big promises and failing to deliver. Then I started going to local business mixers and industry events, places Evan never bothered to show his face. I made sure to talk to competitors, suppliers, even the kind of mid-level players Evan dismissed as not worth his time. I didn't pitch myself yet. I just built goodwill. The sabotage was slow and almost invisible. I never directly told anyone to leave my brother's business. Instead, I kept in touch with his key employees, the ones doing the real heavy lifting. I'd take them out for coffee, ask about their careers, talk about the future. People don't leave jobs. They leave bad management. And Evan was a masterclass in bad management. I also started feeding small, harmless pieces of advice to mutual contacts I knew would repeat it to him. Nothing overtly destructive, just ideas that sounded innovative but were costly and risky. Evan's ego did the rest. If he thought something was his idea, he'd run with it without doing the homework. Meanwhile, Claire's perfect little world was already showing cracks. Pregnancy didn't suit her. She was constantly tired, irritable, and craving the attention she used to get from me. But Evan was too busy being a businessman to coddle her. From what I heard through mutual friends, he didn't exactly tone down his flirting with other women either. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. She made her choice. My father, on the other hand, was starting to realize his golden boy wasn't the miracle he thought. The business wasn't tanking yet, but profits were dipping. Customers were complaining. Evan was burning through resources like a wildfire. I could see it in my father's face when I bumped into him at a networking event. He looked tired, defensive. But pride is a stubborn disease. He'd never admit he made a mistake. While all this was happening, I was quietly working on my own project. I didn't want to just compete with them. I wanted to eclipse them. So I started my own company, but positioned it differently. Leaner, more modern, more connected with the clients and markets my father's business had ignored for years. Didn't make a big announcement. I launched quietly, signing a few small but loyal clients who trusted me personally. Every time I delivered exactly what I promised, on time with zero drama, word spread. The beauty of it was that Evan never saw me as a threat. In his mind, I was done, licking my wounds somewhere. That was the exact illusion I wanted to keep. I dressed well, smiled when I saw people in public, and spoke positively about wishing them well. I made sure there was no gossip he could twist into an attack against me. People notice when you handle betrayal with composure, and they remember it. I know this is going to take time. I'm not here for quick wins or petty jabs. I'm here for the long haul, the kind of revenge that looks like karma to everyone watching. Right now, Evan still has the business, the house, and the pregnant fiancée. But cracks are forming, and I have my foot wedged in each one. They won't see me coming. Not until the day everything they've built on lies and favoritism crumbles, and I'm standing exactly where they thought I'd never be. Update 2, the fall begins. It's been just over 8 months since I walked away from the family business. 8 months of playing the long game. 8 months of building my own empire while my brother thinks he's sitting on a throne. Only that throne is rotting from the inside. My company, small, agile, and built on actual relationships, is thriving. What started as a handful of loyal clients has snowballed into a solid roster of high-profile contracts. Industry blogs have picked up on our rapid growth, calling us the modern alternative to old-school management. I never directly name my father's company, but everyone knows who they're comparing me to. We've been featured in 2 business magazines. I've been invited to speak at panels. I've been approached by investors. Not that I need them right now, but it's flattering. Most importantly, I've been taking clients that were once my father's best accounts. They come to me because I deliver what I promise, and I don't treat them like they're lucky to have my time. And then came the first major fracture in Evan's camp. One of his most trusted employees, Mark, had been with the company for nearly a decade. He handled some of the largest accounts and had personally vouched for Evan when my father handed him the reins. But Mark isn't stupid. He saw the chaos brewing, deadlines missed, resources wasted, clients ignored. He reached out to me just for coffee. By the end of that meeting, I had offered him a position he couldn't refuse. Better pay, better environment, and no Evan breathing down his neck. The bonus? Mark brought with him insider knowledge, current contracts, renewal dates, and a list of suppliers Evan had been mistreating. I didn't immediately act on the information. Instead, I quietly positioned my company as the obvious alternative right as those contracts came up for renewal. One by one, they started to flip. Then came the financial hit. Evan had landed a large, flashy contract with a major client early on, something he'd been bragging about for months. I knew the CEO personally from my years at the family business, so I invited him to lunch. We didn't talk business directly, but I made sure he heard about our recent successes and our focus on reliability. I also happened to mention, offhand, that I'd heard Evan was juggling resources dangerously thin, trying to look bigger than he was. 2 weeks later, the client pulled their contract from Evan and signed with me instead. The loss was a public embarrassment. It didn't just hurt his bottom line. It cracked the illusion that he was untouchable. I heard from a mutual friend that my father went ballistic. He didn't scream at me, of course not. His pride wouldn't allow it, but he tore into Evan for sloppy management. Still, he wouldn't admit I was the better choice. Pride is a stubborn thing, and in his mind, acknowledging my success would mean admitting he'd made the wrong call. Meanwhile, Claire's dream life was crumbling. Pregnancy wasn't going smoothly. Complications, bed rest, constant doctor visits. Evan, true to form, didn't handle it well. Money was tighter than they expected, especially after losing that big contract, and Evan had been spending recklessly to maintain their image. The stress was eating at them. I didn't interfere in that part. I didn't need to. They were doing a fine job of destroying each other without my help. The social fallout started small, but grew quickly. Family friends who once doted on Evan began drifting toward me. At gatherings, people would approach me quietly to say they admired how I'd handled everything with grace. It wasn't long before some of my father's old business partners started showing up at my office instead of his. And then, I made my move. The critical strike came in the form of a deal I'd been working on for months, a merger with a mid-sized competitor that had been slowly eating into my father's market share. They had strong infrastructure, but lacked the client relationships to expand further. I had the relationships, but needed the scale. Together, we became a powerhouse. This wasn't just about growth. This was about leverage. Overnight, we became the single largest supplier in a niche that my father's company, and by extension Evan, depended on heavily. We didn't cut them off immediately, of course. That would be too obvious. Instead, we restructured pricing, terms, and delivery schedules in ways that made them less competitive while keeping everything perfectly legal. Then came the public exposure. I never publicly aired the full betrayal, but in a carefully casual conversation at a charity gala, I let it slip to the right person, a well-connected gossip, that Claire had been my fiancée before she ended up with Evan. I didn't add drama. I didn't tell them about the pregnancy or the affair, just that small, truthful detail. Within 2 weeks, the story had traveled through social circles like wildfire. People connected the dots on their own. By the time it reached my father's business partners, the narrative was simple. Evan had stolen his brother's fiancée and been rewarded for it. It wasn't a good look. The house was another quiet battlefield. My father had given them a large property, but the upkeep alone was expensive. I happened to know the contractor who handled the maintenance and landscaping, an old client of mine. Without ever instructing him to, let's just say his availability for Evan suddenly became scarce. Little repairs took longer. Costs crept up, and when the city announced new property taxes for that neighborhood, I might have been the one who passed along the petition that failed to block it. None of this was illegal. None of it could be traced back to me in any way that mattered. But together, it was enough to make their perfect life bleed from every corner. By now, they were both looking tired, worn down. The smiles at family gatherings were strained. Evan had stopped bragging about the business. Claire barely made eye contact with me. And me? I was thriving. My company was in a position of strength. My reputation was solid. My network was expanding. Every move I made was deliberate, measured, and impossible to spin as bitterness. They're not ruined yet, but they're getting there. The collapse is coming, and when it does, it won't be because I shouted or threw punches. It'll be because they were too arrogant to notice the ground disappearing beneath them, and I'll be standing on solid rock watching it happen. Final update. Complete collapse and moving on. It's been a little over a year since I walked away from the family business, my brother, and my father's approval. Back then, I promised myself I'd play the long game, that I'd dismantle everything they thought was untouchable without raising my voice or breaking the law. Last week, that game ended. The breaking point came faster than even I expected. My brother's company, my father's legacy, finally collapsed under the weight of his incompetence. The contract losses, the supplier squeeze from my merger, and his own reckless spending pushed them into the red. Word got out that they'd failed to deliver on a government contract, a very public, very costly mistake. Penalties hit hard. Within weeks, creditors were circling, clients were pulling out, and my father had no choice but to sell what was left of the business. Not to me, of course, his pride wouldn't allow it, but to a rival who stripped it for parts. The name my father had spent decades building is now just a subsidiary brand, a shadow of what it used to be. My father's anger burned hot at first. He blamed the market, the economy, anyone but Evan. But eventually I saw it in his eyes, disappointment, not just at Evan, but at himself. He wouldn't say it out loud, but the truth was written all over his face. As for Evan and Claire, their picture-perfect life had already been cracking. The business failure just drove the wedge deeper. Money troubles piled up, taxes, mortgage, medical bills from the pregnancy complications. Claire gave birth to a daughter, and for a brief moment, they looked like they might pull together for her. But Evan doesn't do well under pressure, and fatherhood is nothing but pressure. The arguments became public. He started disappearing for business meetings that everyone knew were anything but. By month 3, Claire had moved back in with her parents. By month 6, she'd filed for separation. From what I hear, she's now a single mom working part-time, and Evan sees his daughter occasionally, usually late and empty-handed. The final confrontation wasn't planned. I ran into both of them at a mutual friend's wedding. It was the first time we'd been in the same room in over a year. Evan looked smaller somehow, thinner. His suit was nice but ill-fitted, like it had been bought for better days. Claire had aged, not in years, but in expression. Tired, guarded, wary. They didn't come up to me at first, but eventually Evan did, probably out of obligation. He tried to smirk, to act like the same old golden boy, but there was no light behind. You must be happy with yourself, he said. I looked him in the eye and told him the truth. I'm happy I didn't waste my life where I wasn't valued. That was it. No gloating, no theatrics. I didn't need to rub salt in wounds that were already wide open. I just walked away and went back to enjoying the evening with people who actually respected me. My own life now. It's unrecognizable from the man I was before. My company is solid, profitable, and respected. We just signed a 5-year contract with a national retailer. My team is loyal, and my work-life balance is better than it's ever been. Outside of work, I've started traveling. I bought a house, not the biggest or flashiest, but one that feels entirely mine. I've been dating someone new for the past 6 months, and while I'm not rushing into anything, it's refreshing to be with someone who values honesty over appearances. My father did eventually reach out. It wasn't an apology, he'll never use those words, but it was close. He asked me to come over for dinner. He talked about wishing things had gone differently. He even hinted that if I'd been the one to take over, the business might still be in the family. I didn't bite. I've learned the hard way that some doors, once closed, are better left shut. I told him I was doing well and left it at that. Evan's downfall has been complete. He went from the golden child with the business, the house, and the fiancée to a divorced father scraping together consulting gigs. His charm still gets him into rooms, but it doesn't keep him there. People remember failure, especially public failure. Claire's situation is sad, in a way. She's paying for her choices every day, and while I won't pretend I have sympathy, I don't take joy in it either. We haven't spoken, and I intend to keep it that way. Our lives are in separate worlds now, and that's the closure I didn't expect, realizing that the revenge, while satisfying, wasn't the real reward. The real reward was freedom. Freedom from a family that only saw my worth when it benefited them. Freedom from a relationship built on a lie. Freedom to build something of my own, on my terms, without having to ask anyone's permission. If there's a lesson here, it's this. Never underestimate someone who's been betrayed. We either break or we rebuild stronger than before. And revenge? It doesn't have to be loud or messy. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living a life that proves they were wrong to let you go. As for what's next, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe more travel. Maybe expanding the company. Maybe one day, another engagement. But on my terms, and with the right person, all I know is this: the chapter with them is over, and I'm not looking back.